Welcome to the Be Her Village podcast. My name is Caitlin McGrayus, and I am here with our guest, Laura Otton, who is a licensed clinical social worker specializing in pregnancy, postpartum, anxiety, and other postpartum mood disorders. She runs a practice called Therapy for Motherhood, and she does both home visits, which is so important in the early postpartum time, and virtual services. Welcome, Laura.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Thanks so much for coming. This is great. And I'm glad we got all the tech figured out. We just spent 20 minutes trying to figure out all our new tech.
Yeah.
We're fancy. We're snazzy.
No, it's great to be here, though, because I love talking to moms. I love talking about moms and motherhood and navigating this crazy journey. So I'm glad that you invited me out.
Yes, I think I'm so happy to have you because I think it's really important for mothers to get mental health services. And I think that there's a huge stigma surrounding mental health services. I think that a lot of people, at least the people I know in my life, won't go to therapy and think it's a weakness and think it's something that people do when they're only in crisis or when they're not strong enough to, quote unquote, figure it out themselves. And so can you speak to that a little bit? Do you have that same sense of there being a stigma surrounding mental health?
There's definitely a stigma around mental health in general. And then I've found, especially with moms, there's this added sense of you should be able to handle it. So when I'm talking to moms and I'm seeing red flags of there's something going on here, what I'm hearing from them is, I'm not cut out for this. Other moms are doing this better. And I'm just not being a good mom. So they're not equating those feelings with mental health. They're equating it with, I'm not cut out for this.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to communicate to them. And that's another reason I'm glad I'm doing this is the message here. All of those things are just wrong. You're doing a great job. And this isn't a matter of other moms are doing it better. So instead of seeing it in that light, seeing it as, no, this is just really hard. We don't have the supports in place that you really need as a new mom. You weren't prepared for this. Right. That's not your fault. And a lot of the things that you're going through are not your fault, but you can feel better and you can feel more confident. You can feel like you're doing a great job because most of the time you're already doing a great job. But the stigma that you talked about, that added layer is preventing moms from getting to me and to other maternal mental health specialists because they're saying at home right now saying, this isn't postpartum depression or anxiety. I'm just not doing this right. And I need to hide that because I don't want someone to think that I'm a bad mom. And when I go out there, it looks like all the other moms have it together.
Yes.
And I'm the one that's I'm the problem.
I'm so glad you bring that up because I think that's a really, really common sentiment among mothers that's not talked about. I mean, one of the things that I wanted to address like through our Be Her Village messaging, and you kind of just hit the nail on the head, is this idea that that everybody is going to love motherhood, that everyone is going to love being a mother, that everyone's going to love being surrounded by children all the time. There is this instinctual, of course, love and this chemical reaction that happens, that flood of oxytocin with birth. But motherhood and mothering are kind of its own separate beast. And it's like, not everybody enjoys it. And I would even say that a lot of people don't enjoy it a lot of the time. But there is this idea that there's got to be this perfect mother and we have to have it all ready and all okay. I mean, me and you just sat here and I ran around my house trying to put everything away.
I kept trying to tell you just to stop.
Yes.
Because it's me. I am literally the safest person to be your authentic self in front of.
Yes.
But even then you felt, and you know me, and you still felt this pressure. Let me present my house and my kids in a certain light so you won't judge me and you'll think I'm a good mom.
Yes.
And that pressure, and like you said, after you have the baby, it seems to be the criteria of if you have a healthy baby, and if you're mildly okay, you should be happy. Mildly.
And
okay.
That definition is really loose right now. You can be bleeding and traumatized and cut open in more than one way. And as long as you have a pulse,
you're good.
And that really seems to be the definition. And you should be happy and grateful because you chose this and your baby is alive. That really seems to be the
and
messaging.
that's the bare minimum for you to be happy. And
Right.
the messages you get time and time again from very well-intentioned people is, send pictures. Oh, they're so beautiful. Aren't you enjoying this? Like, enjoy every moment. It goes by so fast. So I tell moms, like, I'm that person at the baby shower that writes on the card of advice, you will not enjoy every moment.
I'm that person
and that
too.
is okay. That should be like the therapy for motherhood tagline.
Yes.
However, when I am talking to moms, I do say, you know what, if you find yourself not enjoying most of those moments, come talk to me. Because I want you're not going to enjoy every moment. Nothing I do or anyone else is going to make that possible. However, if you find yourself really struggling and not feeling that other line I hear a lot is, I just don't feel like myself. That's where I can help. And I can help you enjoy most moments and look back on the day, and the moments that stand out in your mind are those wonderful, cherishing moments, not the rough moments. I help the moms during those rough moments on what to do to feel better in those moments, but I can't take those moments away because motherhood sometimes it's just really hard.
It really is.
It's really hard. And then how do you get your tribe and your support and your village to be able to vent about those hard moments, not perseverate on them, not have them running through your mind constantly, judging yourself for having those moments, but rather to be able to laugh at them, or to be able to let them roll off your back and start the new time with your baby and be able to enjoy it.
I love that. It sounds like it's not mental health support before and after birth is not about erasing the difficulty. It's about, it's going to be hard, right? Like newborns are hard.
It's going to be hard.
It's about learning how to cope with that difficulty.
And be kind to yourself. One of the main exercises I do with all the moms is talk, the self-talk that we have. And we don't realize that we're talking to ourselves constantly. And so when I first bring out moms, they're like, what? Self-talk? Like, what is that? And then we talk about how if a friend were telling you this exact same problem you're having, what would you say to her? All right, compare that to what you're saying to yourself right now. Yeah. And that doesn't immediately solve the problem, but that's our foundation. Okay, let's work from here. So you're talking to yourself like you're talking to that cherished friend. So when those hard moments are happening and the baby's been crying for 4 hours or your toddler is tantruming, you're able to take that deep breath, have grace to stay as calm as possible. And then when it's subsided, you're not looking back at yourself, beating yourself up, but you're being kind to yourself.
Yeah, as a doula, I do the same thing. And it's actually an interesting exercise, what we just did, where you're sitting here like, stop apologizing, stop cleaning, just come sit down. And I'm like, I do that. I go into people's homes, or even before I go, and I'm like, you don't have to be dressed. I don't care what your house looks like. Me and my friends have an agreement. We don't apologize for what our house looks like. And yet it's easy for me to do that for other people, but it's really, really hard to apply to ourselves. And I think we are so much harder on ourselves than we are on other people. So that reframing of just like, hey, why don't you talk to yourself like you would talk to a friend?
And believe it. And it starts with practicing it, and the believing it will come. And I know I've been successful when I'm sitting down with a mom and she's telling me about her week, and she's telling me about how she's reframing, how she's using positive self-talk, how she's reality testing, all these other therapeutic techniques that I do. And sometimes she's not even realizing she's doing it as she's telling me these stories. It becomes second nature. It starts with, okay, I need you to practice this. It's going to be hard at first. It's going to feel a little awkward at first. But keep practicing it like it's a muscle at the gym that you want to expect yourself to be able to do this, lift this heavy weight the first time you go to the gym. You're going to practice and build up to it. But I know I've done the right work when she's telling me, and it's second nature to her, that she's using these coping skills and techniques.
That's wonderful.
And she's feeling better because of it. They work. And that's another thing, like the message to moms is postpartum anxiety and depression are so treatable. There are evidence-based practices out there. There are tools I can give you that will help. And I feel very confident in that. But it's a matter of the moms realizing, I don't have to feel this way anymore. I can be enjoying this more. I can be thriving in this and not just surviving it. It's not I'm a bad mom. It's I'm a mom. And this is hard. and I need some support so I can be that best mom for my baby or for my children. It doesn't really matter the age. That some of the techniques are just the same.
That's amazing. So you're offering women like actual, it's not just, I think some people, I've been in therapy and what you just described are things that I've done with my own therapist. And it's been incredible how a little bit of reframing and a few techniques can change everything. But I think that there is, for people who haven't been in therapy or don't view therapy as something that hands them tools. I think there's this idea that like, if you go to therapy, you're going to go and my mother is a therapist, and this is probably my idea of therapy for like the first 30 years of my life. But it's this idea that you're going to go and you're just going to like dive into like childhood hurts and like re-examine your like inner child. And it's going to be painful and it's going to take 5 years to see any progress. And that's what therapy is. And I love the way you're describing it because it sounds to me like this place where I will go to get an objective perspective and some actual tools that I can use in my day to day. And so it's not this thing where you have to uncover past traumas, which maybe that's part of it, but it doesn't sound like it has to be. And it's not this thing that's going to take 10 years. You know, you hear about people like just being in therapy for their entire lives, which is fine if that's what works for them. But it sounds to me like you're saying that a few sessions or some like really targeted sessions with a mental health professional for this transition can be really, really helpful.
Oh gosh, yes. So I'm glad you brought that up because you're right. That misconception that I'm going to come in and it's going to take years for progress to be made. And that's why it's so important to see a maternal mental health therapist too, because when I'm coming in, it's first triaging. I'm first looking at, are you getting your basic needs met? And if you're not,
and you're talking, basic like food and water, like
water,
real basic.
When the baby is sleeping, I don't say sleep when the baby sleeps, but when you are supposed to be resting, when you're supposed to be off duty, are you actually able to? And what tools do you need to actually be able to turn your mind off and rest? So that's the basic foundation. But then, yes, I go straight into how can you feel better now? Because when you have a 3-week-old, 1-month-old, you can't wait months even. So not forget years, like you can't wait months to feel better. You are, some of these women, you know, they're really surviving hour by hour. So you need things right away to practice. Do past things come up in my therapy sessions? Absolutely. Because your sense of motherhood, breastfeeding, your birth experience, that raises your whole life, your family history and what you perceived motherhood was going to be like comes from your family, from your friends, from also past trauma too. So that can play a role in it, but that's down the line. You need help and you need to start feeling better right away. And so it is more short-term therapy rather than those years psychoanalyzing you. That's not what I do.
Wow, that's wonderful. That's really, really helpful to know. So how many sessions are you typically seeing people for?
So it can depend. However, it is more on months basis. So I would say average is 6 months to a year. My practice is on the newer side. I was at a community mental health clinic before this. But what I'm seeing is a lot of moms need that support during the adjustment to new motherhood, returning to work, around breastfeeding if they are breastfeeding. So those like pivotal transitions, or if they've had a birth experience that was scary or upsetting in any way, working through that and changing that narrative. So that is more months versus years. And then, like I said, things do come up of past things. I have women who have lost close family members when they were pregnant or right after they gave birth. And handling that grief when you're pregnant and then when you have the baby and the baby never got to meet that person who was very special to you. So grief work is going to come out. And that's going to be work too. But I let the mom guide me. I'm very much into what's going on here that's impacting your life. How is it impacting your relationship with your partner, with your kids, your self-identity? Let's work through that. And then if you're in a good functioning place, like I don't need to be, we're not going to string this out forever. I want you back to feeling like yourself again in this new normal you have.
That's great. So just getting back to, so that women who are listening, pregnant people who are listening, and birth workers who are working with these growing families in those really early newborn days where the medical establishment kind of abandons them. They're like, good luck, 6 weeks, see you for a vaginal exam. Okay. So for those people who are at home with their babies or pregnant and will be at home with their babies, what are, like, if there were red flags or there were specific things, because I think one of the meetings I recently went to for the Project 62, the Suffolk County Mental Health Coalition, we were talking about how we went around the room and every woman in the room was a birth provider or mental health professional of some sort. And we wanted to identify the gaps that currently exist. And everybody went around the room, and a lot of people had professional stories, but a lot of people also had personal stories. And the sentiment that was echoed again and again, and I was one of the people that had it, was that the language that's used surrounding mental health is so clinical. Postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety. It sounds really like something somebody else has that's really far away. And we were talking about developing a checklist or developing new language, or, not even reinventing and developing, but just kind of pulling in something that we can hand women that describes it in a much more reasonable and relatable way. Like, I had this fear that when my baby would wake up, I had this fear when I was pregnant, that when my baby would wake up, my dog would jump up and eat him out of the crib. Like that, I had this fear that if my husband or mother, we had a tile floor in our apartment, if they walked with the baby, they would trip and I could see his head like smash on the tile floor. I didn't know that was a sign of postpartum anxiety. I didn't know that those were intrusive thoughts. I was joking at the meeting. I'm like, I didn't know that until like 2 weeks ago, which is embarrassing because I'm a doula and a mom and like, I should know this. But if you could, this is all to say, if you could come up with like some things that real moms that don't have any clinical experience and any knowledge of what postpartum anxiety and depression, what are the things that they should be looking out for, that it's like, hey, I'm having this is a little past the variation of normal. It might be time to call my OB or call my midwife or call a therapist directly.
Absolutely. So if there is a history, so if you look back on your life and you struggled during certain times with overwhelming feelings of sadness or crying or anxiety, feeling stressed out, overwhelmed. So the history, if you have that history, you are more likely to be struggling after the birth of a baby. Also, if you're sensitive to hormonal changes. So if you're the woman who couldn't tolerate the birth control pill, or around your period, you felt very moody and had change of mental health, that's another big red flag too. And then if you look around and you feel isolated, you don't feel like you have the supports, your family lives far away or they're not supportive, your partner works long hours in the city, that kind of thing I see a lot. You feel very alone. You don't have that mom tribe yet. And also if you're having those thoughts, I'm going to echo what I said before because I hear it over and over again. It's almost like there's a script that new moms have and they don't even realize it. I'm just not cut out for this. I'm a bad mom. I just don't feel like myself. If any of those are ringing bells for you right now, that's a sign that you're struggling with something more than what we would call like a typical adjustment period. Also, the baby blues should clear up within 2 or 3 weeks, and they should respond to rest, reassurance, and additional support. So if you're in those 2 or 3 weeks and you're miserable, try to get that rest, But try to get the rest and the reassurance from loved ones, and bring in that additional support. But even if you get those things and you're still just feeling some of these ways, get help, get screening. Most of us in this field will offer, free phone consultations. So we can tell you what's typical or like, no, actually this could respond really well to treatment. I'm glad you brought up the intrusive thoughts because almost every single mom has some version of that. They're saying about 90%.
Wow.
I would say it's like 95, 99% because I've yet to meet a mom who doesn't have some version of what you just described.
Yeah.
And so, okay, well, 100% of women or 90% of women don't need maybe mental health therapy. But then, so I would say to that, if you're having those thoughts and you're not able to tell yourself, that's not going to happen. My dog's not going to jump into the crib and eat my baby. And then that thought should float away and you should be able to keep doing what you're doing. If you're not able to do that with whatever thought you're having, that's a sign, you're right, of postpartum anxiety and depression.
I was actually very disappointed in the lack of response from my dog in the middle of the night because I was the only one up and he was sleeping. And I was looking at him like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, I thought you were going to eat him and you're not even, at the very least, could you get up and watch me while I'm tending to my baby?
Would look annoyed at me for getting out of bed. And I would be like, I'm sorry to disturb you, Callie. So I know I had the same thing. But all of us moms have some thought of, and when we look at it objectively, we're like, that's a weird thought, like your dog eating your baby. But some thought of harm coming to our baby. Maybe it's that we're afraid we're going to do something to the baby. When we bathe the baby, when we walk down the stairs with the baby, when we go out to the mall with the baby. And I don't even want to name it because I don't want to put thoughts into mom's head.
Right. I'm like, what other ways can babies be harmed, Laura?
But a lot of these moms, when you're having these thoughts, sometimes they're really embarrassing to say aloud.
Absolutely.
Because you don't want to tell someone, I'm afraid of hurting my baby in X, Y, and Z way. Moms will even have these horrible images come into their mind. They're really disturbing, really upsetting. That I can help treat, and other mental health professionals can treat. But if you find that you have that thought and then you're able to brush it aside and continue about your day, you're telling yourself, hey, this is one of those intrusive thoughts I heard about in the podcast. It's okay. I can move on. I'm being safe when I'm walking down the stairs, and that's all I can do.
Yeah.
Great. If you're not able to do that, that's not your fault. You are not to blame for having that thought.
But you are not
alone.
extra help.
You might need some extra help.
Yeah.
You're not alone in having that thought. I don't want moms to be embarrassed. There's nothing a mom could tell me that I'm going to look at her with judgment at all. Like,
I don't know. I could test that, Laura.
You can test it. You can test it. I've been in the mental health field for long enough. I've heard enough stories. I've been with people who have really struggled. Nothing surprises me or shocks me. And I say that to moms of like, this is the safest space I can offer you. And that in of itself is therapeutic. Just being able to tell someone, I'm having this horrible, embarrassing thought or shameful thought, and just saying it out loud and having someone be able to say, okay, let's work with that. So you don't have that thought, because that sounds really miserable having that thought.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is really, really common, that is like the most taboo thing to say ever, but I think, and I would love to hear your perspective on if it's so common, but at least in my life, my friends' lives, and my doula work, I'm thinking of this one mom. I remember walking into her house, and she was probably the first mom that I worked with that I think I had just attended a postpartum mood disorder training. And so I knew what to look out for. And sometimes it's like, there's not any one thing. There's just like a sense in the room. There's a little bit of a disconnect. The baby's not being picked up, and you can tell that someone's like kind of putting a front on so that they can get through. Right. And I sensed that with her, and I started sharing my own story and my own feelings of regret. And I think that people feel regretful of having a baby. And again, it doesn't have to be like a 24/7 feeling of regret, but it can be this like idea that's floating around your head of like, why did I do this? And it can be really devastating to feel that, especially when you tried to get pregnant. Maybe you tried for years and years and years to get pregnant.
And spent a lot of money.
Spent a lot of money and time and angst, and you planned, and you were so public about how excited you were, and you had all your photo shoots and your baby shower, and everyone is joining in on this. And the idea is you should be so thrilled, and yet you're sitting here, and it might be hormonal, it might be a mental health issue, or it might be completely normal to look at this baby and go, oh, this is way harder than I thought it was going to be, and I wish I could go back. Like, I love you, but also I'd love to put you back because this is hard. And I remember sharing that with this client, and everything changed, and her facade just fell away, and she just said, this is so hard, and I don't know what I'm doing. And we just had this really honest conversation, but it was because I shared my story. And this is part of why I'm doing Be Her Village, and I'm doing this podcast, is to kind of like have, if we can even reach one pregnant person or one new mom that's sitting there in her house looking at her baby that she loves so desperately, but who also wishes that she can go back to her job and go back to her life and go out to dinner and sleep a full night of sleep. I think that feelings of regret are so, so common. And it's like, to say that you regret having your baby is the ultimate bad mother.
Right. You don't appreciate, you're not grateful about all the people who want babies, who don't have them, your baby's healthy. Yes. Oh, yes. And the mom doesn't even have to say that to get those responses, because she's telling herself those things.
Yes.
Of, I should be grateful, I should be enjoying this. But I just want my old life back. And I think all moms have that, even if it's a tiny percentage of them in those moments. And that goes back to you not being able to enjoy a moment. I can't tell a mom who just has slept 2 hours in the past 24 hours and is in such horrible physical condition and taking care of this baby that she should be enjoying it.
People tell women that. I just posted on Instagram, enjoy every moment. And then about how bogus that is. It irritates me to no end. It's so well-intentioned when people say it, but they say it on the way out. They say it without offering help or meals or laundry or cleaning or, let me hold the baby so you can go take a nap. They don't say it enjoy every moment. They say it more enjoy every moment because it goes really fast, and before you know it, you're old and your kids are gone. It's it's almost more of a threat.
It does have that feeling to it. And so it keeps the mom who is saying, I want my old life back. And part of me regrets, or maybe a large part of me regrets this. And it keeps her silent. And then that stays with her, and it affects her relationship with the baby, it affects her relationship with her partner and with herself, her view of herself. So I'm coming in there to, all right, let you tell your story to me, and let's reframe this as you're a survivor of what has been hard about this. And let's take that pressure off to enjoy every moment. And let's treat yourself like you would a close friend. And being able to say those thoughts out loud and not have it be judged can be so freeing. And then to find your mom tribe where you can talk to them about how hard your newborn is being, what a jerk your 2-year-old is being, or whatever you need to say to be able to laugh and get it out in a safe place. So then when you're with your child or with your partner, you're able to take that deep breath and be the best version of yourself. And what we haven't talked about is the partner and how important he or she is in this as well. And what few people realize is, the statistics for postpartum mood and anxiety disorders, I've seen 1 in 5, 1 in 7, it's somewhere around there. And for partners and dads, it's 1 in 10. That's a high percentage. We're forgetting about the partner so much. I have to bring the partner in some capacity and making sure that he or she's getting support, that he or she isn't, and if they are struggling, getting them the resources they need. And because often we see the partner and they're being cold or distant or working long hours, or they seem aloof from it. And we're not seeing that as maybe he or she's struggling with something mental health related. We're saying, oh, they're not being supportive. They're being a jerk about this. And I go in there to see it as, okay, maybe they're struggling with mental health too. And how we bring them in, and how do we make this relationship work postpartum? Because as you know, your relationship completely changes once you have a baby.
Yes.
And it can go in the path of getting stronger because suddenly your communication's better. You have this shared joy and shared love. So it can be really good for a relationship. But if you're on the path of seething resentment and not feeling heard and not coping well, it's going down the path of you two becoming at best functional roommates and coworkers of this parenting thing. And at worst, a severing of the relationship or abuse, to be more extreme. But
yeah, it's really, it's alarming. I mean, minus abusive situations and abusive on every level of abuse that there is, but it's almost like in an ideal fantasy world, there should be a stop to any separating or divorces in the first year after baby, because it's such a stressful time. And that's a ridiculous statement that I know, I'm not trying to judge people who are getting out of terrible situations. And there's there's a close friend of mine who is currently going through something like that with a small baby, and she's, you know, she has to do what's best for her, but it's like, it's hard to see people fall away from each other in this time after baby.
And when I tell couples, the workshop I did for the nesting place on relationships was my most popular. And so that's because everyone struggles in the relationship postpartum. And what the first thing we did was talk about all the reasons it's hard to be in a relationship postpartum. And I said that to them, this is not to be doom and gloom about how hard this is. It's to say to you, of course you're struggling right now. Like, look at this long list of why you're struggling. Like, of course you are. But the good news is, here are tools and here are things that you all can do to make it better and stronger for in the future when you have a parent who's ailing and needs to move into your house, or one of you loses a job, or bad stuff happening. You're going to be stronger if you have these things in place, and you're role modeling for your children what you would want them to have in a relationship. And we forget that sometimes. Like, you're not just raising a baby and a child, you're raising a girlfriend, a boyfriend, a wife, a husband, a mother, and a father, right? And if we look at it like that, we're like, oh, well, we're modeling that to them of how to act, how to be mad, how to argue in a way that is not destructive, but in a way that is assertive and healthy. And that starts in the home with your relationship. And in that workshop, you know, I talked about how the relationship comes first. I'm not talking about, you know, a life or death situation. Who do you choose, your partner or your child? You pick your child.
That's a whole other podcast.
That's a whole other podcast. You pick your child. But as far as the time and resources and energy, that relationship with your partner has to come first, because that's modeling and that's providing that safe, loving relationship for your children. Because that's our job, is to give love and security to our children.
Right. And I love that you're saying this, because I think there's also this feeling of whatever happens after the birth is like, it's forever. But the truth of it is, while this feels like forever, some days, certainly, it absolutely does, it's temporary. My kids are like, my son, he's such a nudge, but he's 7, and he'll come downstairs sometimes and just be like, Mom, you know, it's 11 years till I go to college. I'm like, thanks, kiddo. Like, way to just come down and remind me. And some days that kills me, and some days I am marking my calendar for when we drop him off. But it's at the end of this, I need to have a relationship with my partner. And like, we will, you know, well, at the end of the day, my kids are older now, but like at the end of the day, if it's after 9 o'clock and you're coming downstairs, we are telling you to go, like, just get whatever you need and go back upstairs. Because if we don't have some sort of relationship, the two of us, if we're not making eye contact and we're not talking to each other and we're not getting through this difficult time of just parenting small children, then we're not going to have anything left when they leave. And that's a really scary thought, that if you're not actively working on it, that it just kind of, there won't be anything left. There might be like a coworker situation, but I want, you know, at least personally, I want there to be a spark left. I want there to be lust. I want there to be romance and love and shared interests. And it's an interesting exercise to grow together as adults. Like, my husband and I could not be more different ourselves from who we were when we first met, right? Like, we've both grown so much, and certainly through parenthood, we've grown, and there's like this additional stressor of parenting. Relationships are hard enough, but then the idea of like, how do we communicate? Where do we draw lines? Where do we, you know, like, and modeling for future adults, it's a lot of pressure.
It's a lot of pressure. And when you have a supportive partner, it makes all the world of difference. And so I do a lot of that couples work to get relationships in that healthier place, and making sure that they are putting the time and resources for their relationship and not just for the kids. Because as you said, when the kids grow up, what's left? Same with your own identity and doing things for you, because when the kids grow up, who are you? And you are always going to be a mom, and you will always have that role, but it's going to change and evolve through the years. And losing that sense of identity is really is a risk postpartum, because you're right.
Risk.
Suddenly you're confined to your house and the days are endless, and you have this little thing to take care of. But that's going, like you said, that's going to change. And you still need to have you at the end of it. And you're going to need your relationship at the end of it as well.
I'm not sure if I feel like it was traumatic or not, but like, I think it was.
Do you want me to assess that?
No, maybe on a different time. But my first birth was like, I like to call it less than ideal. It was not even remotely. I had this vision of like hypnosis and a birthing center, and I would open like a flower and my baby would drop out of me. And I ended up in an OR, abandoned by my midwife, being treated horribly. Like it was literally the opposite of what I wanted. And then I was handed this baby. And I remember like so distinctly coming home, and my mom and my stepdad came over like the first weekend we were home. So he was like 7 days old. And I remember just holding this little 8-pound baby in front of me. And I said to my stepdad, I said, the whole world, like everything that was in my vision, you know, I used to like have big thoughts and very self-centered, as anybody pre-children naturally is. That's not a dig. It's just everything revolves around me. And the whole world went down into this baby. And like all I could see was this baby. And so my entire identity became being his mother. And I remember my stepdad being like, well, you know, you have to like do other things. And I was like, yeah. Okay. Shush. Like, I'm looking at my baby. I have to look at him. And I had no idea that was not, I don't want to say normal. It's really common. It doesn't have to be that way, but I only in the past year. So I had him and I stayed home with him for 2 years. I began doing doula work. Doula work was like so healing for me in that I had something to do. It actually added way more things onto my plate, but it helped me to have my own identity. I would go to family functions when I was only I hate being derogatory like that. When I was a stay-at-home mom, and I would only have my one kid to talk about. Yeah. And I remember hating that because I like to use my brain and I like to be stimulated and I like to have conversations about things. And even though I'm like keeping up with current affairs and stuff, and I don't think current affairs was something I was talking about outside of the family at the time, but like, it was just, I was only a mother, and it's taken me years to kind of come back to that. And now I am so many things to so many people and so many things for myself. And mother is one of those things, but it's just one of them.
One of them. And you are a better mother because you have those things.
Such a better mother.
Another, hey, PSA announcement to the moms and pregnant women listening. If you're saying right now yourself, that's all I want is to be this and this identity, and this is all I'm giving it all to this baby, I would want to challenge that to be, you will be a better mom. You will be a better partner when you're taking care of yourself. And taking care of yourself means to be able to do things that are just for you and that feel good just for you. And when you have that, you come back to the baby or the child or your partner or whatever it is, and you're going to be a calmer, happier, more stable person.
It's hard to imagine that as a pregnant person. I recorded a podcast. It's going to air soon with my best friend, who is one of the Gaia midwives. And she just had her own baby. So let me just set the stage for, she is a brilliant midwife. She is a business owner. They're growing. She's accomplishing amazing things. They have hospital privileges. They're attending births. She's doing incredible things as a midwife. But when she was like 8 months, 9 months pregnant, she texted me one day, I think I really just want to stay home and homeschool the kids. Like something along those lines.
Talk about hormones.
Talk about nesting
hormones.
And I literally I was her doula, but there was like this balance of, when am I your doula, where I would have a very different response as to like, let's explore that feeling. No, I was her friend. And I just wrote back, no, you don't. You don't want to do that.
You think you do.
You think you do because you're nesting, but no, you don't. And like, we talk about it now. And it was just a funny moment but she meant it. She wanted to hunker down. And there is definitely a sense of when you're pregnant, it's like, I just want to be home with my baby forever. And I would imagine it's hard for people to listen to us talk about being something other than a mother when, if you're pregnant, it's like, well, how can I be anything but? How can I do anything else?
And that's the strength of the hormones. And I would not say when I'm meeting with a mom who has a 1-month-old, yeah, your life revolves around this newborn. And I'm not going to tell you otherwise, because you're keeping that newborn alive, and that newborn needs you 24/7. This is a growth easing in, even if it's for 10 minutes a week. During that early few months of you time.
Yes.
It needs to be fit in there. But yeah, the hormone those hormones are keeping your baby alive. They have to be that needy in order to thrive.
Yes.
And so you're responding to that, and that's great. Like, how amazing is that? And then let's build you back into it slowly and gradually.
Right.
Bringing your sense of identity back in.
So it's really about just balance.
Balance and adjustment to what your children need, because then you're going to have the time. You could have a 4-year-old who suddenly gets very ill and needs you 24/7 again. And you will have to drop things and attend to them. So I'm not saying the kids go on the back burner, but it's a matter of like, who are you and who are you now as a mother? And if you're a stay-at-home mom with 10 kids, how are you fitting in those minutes a week that are for you? So you still have that.
I think so much of what mothers tend to do, and I think this is where it's really important to hear your message, is they tend to not prioritize themselves. Like those 10 minutes a week, well, I could be reading a book to my child, or cooking an organic meal, or this or that. Like, I should be stimulating my child in some way. And it's like, well, a healthy baby and this is kind of going back to what we were speaking about in the beginning, like the definition of healthy in a medical sense is alive. Pulse and blood pressure is good. Their respiratory rate is good. But the definition of healthy has to be expanded to a mother who has some sense of herself, who has, some stability in her mood, who has some care for herself. It's the oxygen mask first theory, right? That you have to take care of yourself before you take care of your children, because they've done studies. I'm sure you're familiar with them, where I think there's this idea of like, I'm not going to take medicine for, anxiety or mood disorders. I'm not going to do it while I'm breastfeeding. I'm not going to do it while I'm pregnant, because I don't want to hurt my baby. But then you're looking at, well, if you don't take them and you're suffering, then your baby's suffering too, because you're literally not looking at them. You're not doing the things you would do and responding to them. So they're hurting in other ways.
It's the cost of not treating. So we look at, well, what are the risks of treating? What are the risks of these medications? And we should also be looking at, what are the risks of not taking the medication? What's the risk of not coming to see me or someone else?
Right.
And you're right. If your pediatrician said your child is struggling, this is the professional to go see. Moms and dads, they'd be at the professional's door in a heartbeat. When I have the problem of the doulas, the pelvic floor specialists, lactation consultants say, hey, you're struggling, someone can help you with this. Moms put that on the back burner because it's for them. It's exactly what you said of, I'm just going to push through this, or it goes back to that message I said at the beginning. I'm just not cut out for this. This isn't mental health.
It's like a personality issue.
It's a personality issue. It's a strength issue. It's, I'm not being a good mom issue. No, this is a mental health thing. And a lot of women go through this. That statistic is based on what we know now. And if more moms come forward, you'll find that it's probably even higher because more of us are struggling with this than you think.
Right.
And so it's a matter of, me shouting out to the moms right now, you can feel better. You can be the best mom that you want to be. I compared it with one person. It's like, okay, imagine you as a mom on 5 hours of sleep. Your child, you're still fixing meals. You're still taking them to the bus stop or daycare. You're still meeting their needs and you're still being a good mom. And that's what you are right now. But imagine you on 8 or 9 hours of sleep.
Oh my God, that sounds great.
Imagine the patience you would have. You'd want to bring out that like beautiful wooden craft toy you have, and you would want to fix that extra healthy meal. Like you would do more and feel more and be calmer and happier and enjoy your child more. When your child is crying or throwing a tantrum, you would have a greater sense of calm on 8 hours of sleep versus 4 hours of sleep. So, okay, you're doing fine on 4 or 5 hours of sleep, but you're not feeling great. Imagine if you got more. See how that makes you a better mom.
Yeah.
I can help you feel more confident and feel like you are being the best mom that you can be.
And then your kids will benefit.
And your
from
kids
that
will benefit.
well.
And the message there is not that you're doing it bad, and it's that you deserve to enjoy this more too. And these times are fleeting. Your 2-month-old is not going to be 2 months again. And the hardest, I think one of the most heartbreaking parts of my job is then the healing process of working with the moms to look back on those times and not beat themselves up for not getting help sooner. And how to look at themselves of like, look, you were doing the best you could at the time. And giving back to other moms is so healing too. You know, going to support groups and helping other moms through it, or volunteering on helplines, things like that, helps get that sense of closure of, I struggled. I wish I'd gotten help sooner, but let me reframe that as I was doing the best I could. I got help eventually when I needed to. And now I'm going to give back because I learned, and now I want other moms to learn.
I think that's very common in the world of, the Be Her Village world, where people, all the professionals that are servicing women and providing services, whether it's volunteer or it's a professional setting, many of them, not all of them, but many of them come from, they went through a trauma, they had a less than ideal experience, and that spurned them into serving women for their career. Speaking of, how did you get into this work?
Oh,
I don't think I know the story.
No, you don't know this. So I went to NYU for social work, and I knew I wanted to go into mental health because I always found it very interesting. I worked with severely mentally ill, homeless and formerly homeless in the city, and loved working with people with mental health issues. And with that, I learned more about substance use and trauma, and got great exposure to all of that to learn. And then when I started doing therapy work out here on the island, I loved doing therapy, and I loved being that safe space and helping people work through these things. And then I had my daughter, and motherhood was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And it was like, why does anyone talk about this? And then I realized I love talking to moms. So once you have a child, you kind of join this mom club where at the Y, where I go, or at the library, or at the playground, I'm suddenly talking to moms all the time. And I loved it. And then when I was pregnant with my son, I started to delve more into this. I started going to trainings. I started reading books about maternal mental health, because before that I thought, well, I'm a therapist, so I know how to treat anxiety and depression. Like, what's the difference here? And then the more research I did, the more trainings I attended, the more I realized, no, this is a specialty. And this is different. It is not depression or anxiety. This is postpartum depression and anxiety. And you have a newborn in the mix. And so I decided to launch out to make this my specialty, because I love babies and children, which I was fine with them before. But I wasn't one of those women who are like, babies, like, let me hold your baby.
Yeah.
That was not me. I was like, I'll look at it from across the room, and then
like,
when
it's
it starts
cute,
to cry,
but okay.
I'll go away. Then when I had my own kids, I suddenly realized, like, kids and baby, they're the best, and moms are the best, and dads are the best. And I love this, and I want to help them. And if I can help the parents, they're going to be better with their babies. And because when I worked at a community mental health clinic, the cases that broke my heart were the kids who came in. And so it's like, if I can reach the parent when they're struggling, I'm going to make a difference generationally, because they're going to be parenting differently. So that idea I loved, and I love moms. So here I am with a private practice where this is all I do, pregnant and postpartum. And I've gotten to meet these amazing women like yourself and the others that I wish I had. You know, when you look back, it's like, man, I wish I had you all. And another message I give moms is like, we're out here. There's so many of us out here that could change your world, but you have to find us, and we're trying to shout loudly so you know that we're here. But and I think the message is spreading. But I'll mention a pelvic floor specialist to someone, and they're like, "What's a pelvic floor?" Or like, oh,
"What's a pelvic floor?" Not even what's a pelvic floor specialist, but
what's
like
a pelvic floor.
This was my conversation with Rachel Parada. I'm like, can we start with just like, what the hell is a pelvic floor?
What's a pelvic floor? Because women don't know what their pelvic floor is, and Postpartum doula, I was talking to someone about 3 days ago, and I was describing what postpartum doula can do. And she's like, wait, what?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're describing this like magical angel fairy. And I'm like, I know, but it's real.
Fairy godmother.
Fairy godmothers, they're real. And
they're real.
So I'm not just a therapist, because I'm also linked up to these other amazing women and men who can help support moms and make this motherhood journey one of thriving and not just surviving day by day.
And that is so exactly what Be Her Village is working on, because I think that we want to reach the women who know, for the registry. We want people to use the registry to pay for their doulas and their midwives and their mental health counseling and their yoga classes. But we also want to reach the women who have no idea about any of it, and that come on to like get their newborn photographer paid for, and then are like, oh, what's this thing? Click, 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 and read articles and listen to podcasts and find in one place the whole community of service providers. Because I am a mom of 3. I've been a mom for 7 years. I've been a doula for 5 years. I am still learning what services exist and why they're so important in doing Be Her Village and doing these podcasts, because it's not well known right now how impactful these services are. And the idea that Be Her Village is going to connect women with these services and get them paid for and educate them on what they even need, and that real people are going to have a better time because they're going to be connected with these professionals. It makes my heart start racing a lot faster, right? Because this is the whole thing, is like, I sit at these meetings like you do with all these birth professionals, and I don't think people know about the incredible work that they're doing. And I don't think the masses know right now. And that is part of our mission, is to get the amazing birth professionals that are currently a niche, section of this industry, and get them out to the masses, so that the same way you're buying a stroller, you're buying your pre-Cana of birth, right? Book your mental health. That's actually, something that I've been talking about with some of the mental health professionals that are signing on with Be Her Village, is that they're actually, because they're able to reach people on Be Her Village earlier, they're reaching people who are 20 weeks pregnant, who are making registries. So they're creating services like, come, for a package where you come in before and you talk about these things before crisis. And then you have something scheduled for right after your birth, and you're able to reach people and walk them through sooner, rather than, I'm in crisis, now I need to find a mental health professional, which is how it's been done forever. Is now we're trying to reach people beforehand and explaining, hey, this is why you need this thing, and this is why it'll make your life a whole lot better.
I've been asked, will you work with pregnant women? I'm like, I would love if all of my clients, I got them when they were pregnant, or especially if they're struggling with miscarriages, infertility, things like that. I want to work with you then.
Yes.
Because imagine if everyone had relationship counseling beforehand, and hey, these are the things you need set up postpartum, and let's talk about a plan. Let's talk about your mental health and your coping skills. Let me learn about you before you're in crisis with a screaming newborn.
Right.
That's my ideal person to work with, and the ideal family unit to work with. But you're right. Sometimes we wait until all the sirens are blaring. It's not smoke now, it's fire. And it's harder for me to come in to put out the fire than it is to control the smoke, or to even set it up so it doesn't even happen.
And for women to be able to set up their support well in advance, so that they don't ever get to be on fire. So
because that's not fun.
It's not
fun.
Awful.
It's miserable. And so much of my job is like, let's make your days better, and let's help you feel better.
I love that. That's great. So before we wrap up, I would love, you've given so much great advice today, but we do have an audience of pregnant people and birth workers. So if you could give one piece of advice as they go into parenthood, what would it be? It doesn't have to be mental health related, but it can be. If they had one thing that they came away from this interview with, what would it be?
To wrap up the message that I would want to give expecting parents is the oxygen mask on you first. The hormones are going to kick in, and they need to, where the baby comes first in a lot of ways. Like, let's go back to those basic feeding and nurturing ways. But you have to be taken care of first, so you can do that. So it's this weird paradox of the baby comes first, but you come first. You come first so that the baby can come first. And taking care of yourself is essential need. It is not a luxury, and it's not a getting out for a pedicure once a week. I'm talking about self-care and caring for yourself on that very basic level of treating yourself kindly and with grace and with love. And if you're listening to this and you're saying that's hard for me to do, please get the help from a maternal mental health specialist. Look for that specialty because you deserve it and your family deserves it.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us today,
Thanks
Laura.
for having me.
And thank you all for listening. This is Caitlin McGrayus with the Be Her Village podcast.